It always makes me so happy to do these wrap-ups every month because I always get to talk about some of my favorite books. I read 17 books in the month of September, or not 17, I read 19 books. This is the first month I've read 19 in so long. The last like 3 months I've read 17 books, and I just am used to saying 17 books, but I read 19. So let's get into all of the books that I read this month or this last month. I am so excited to talk about them because I read so many good books. And make sure you subscribe because there's new videos every single day during the entire month of October because it's Booktober. So let's get into this video and I hope you guys enjoy. I'm not gonna go through the rating of every single book I read because I genuinely don't know, and I don't want to pull out my phone for every single book that I read because I read 19. But if I remember like a rating off the top of my head, I will share it. I read The Silent Patient for the first book during the month, and this is by Alex Michalowicz. This thriller lives up to all the hype that people talk about. Like, I cannot tell you how much I love this book. I was really surprised by how much I loved it, and I think it's because so many people have said that this is a great thriller and there's like a twist at the end. So I genuinely was like, I'm not gonna like this. It's gonna be overhyped, but I really, really love this like so much. I also think I don't read enough thrillers written by men, and so I just like went into this not really feeling like I was gonna like it. It's about Alicia, who pretty much her life seems perfect, and then one night her husband returns home late from work, and Alicia, she shoots him 5 times in the face and then never speaks another word. She ends up going to a psychiatric unit, and pretty much she doesn't want to talk, and they try to get her to speak. The psychotherapist, Theo, he's captivated by her story, and he's pretty much like, you know what, I'm gonna try to see if I can get her to speak. And it is such a good book. The twist at the end was really good. Again, I feel like this was a really good thriller. And then I read Finding Perfect by Colleen Hoover, and this is the end of the Hopeless series. I personally was glad that I read this because there was a part that definitely needed to be wrapped up that I got from this book, but I also feel like I probably could have done without most of the book. Like, they could have added the piece that they kind of shared in this book to the last book. So I mean, again, it was kind of nice to wrap it up, but I feel like I just don't really enjoy Colleen Hoover's books as much as I used to, and maybe it's because her writing sometimes falls a little flat for me now, but I think when I first started like getting into reading, her books literally had me in a chokehold. And then the next book that I read was Living Dead Girl by Elizabeth Scott. And this is about, I can't really like say too much about it, but it says, this is Alice. She was taken by Ray 5 years ago, and she thought she knew how her story would end, and she was wrong. Now, personally, this book was good up until like the middle/end. It's a pretty short book. Like, there really isn't much to it. It's less than 200 pages, but I feel like the book was really, really sad. And not that I need like a happy ending with every book or like a happy middle, but I feel like I need something that's gonna like give me some type of hope, and this was literally just like sad. And sometimes I feel like books like that, if they get in the wrong hands, it could be a bad thing. But again, it's not, you know, I can't save the world, neither can authors, and I feel like authors do give a good representation of what their book's about, so like going into it, you kind of know what it's gonna be about. But there were definitely a lot of like hard things that they talk about in this book, and then there was really no like happy anything in the book. So yeah, that was definitely hard to read, but I did enjoy it overall, and I probably will recommend it. I also read Heartstopper 3, and just looking at this book makes me want to read the whole series again. This was a book series that I love so much, and I rated actually the whole series 4 stars. I keep coming back to this series, I think, because the author did such a great job of like making you connected to the characters. This is by Alice Oseman. And I don't know, I just feel like I don't normally read graphic novels, and I found myself just like wanting to pick this up. And I think the next Heartstopper, like 5, which is the last one, I think it comes out either early next year or like maybe December or something, and I cannot wait. Honestly, I need to pre-order it. And then I read In a Jam by Kate Catterberry. This book was long, like long. It was 455 pages, and you guys know how I feel about romances being long. Like, if they're gonna be long, they need to have a purpose, and I feel like this one was just long to be long sometimes. It did kind of remind me of the Knock 'Em Out series a little bit, because it was just very like the guy, he's kind of like gruff, and like they are in a small town, and there's a little girl that he's like taking care of, which kind of reminded me of how Naomi was taking care of her sister's child, and he is taking care of his sister's child in this book. And I don't know, it was just like really good, but it wasn't something that I would probably overly hype because it was so long. I think that if it was shorter, I would have enjoyed it so much more. She does have a new book that just came out, and I probably will read that, as long as it's not as long as this book. Like if it's 300 pages, you got me. Like her writing is really good, but it just was a little too long for me. I think I rated this like 3 or 3.5 stars. Make sure to follow me on Goodreads, because every single time I finish a book, I update my Goodreads. Like literally, it's almost always like accurate to a T, and I do that because I know if I get behind, I will literally like never catch up on it. Then I read I Want to Be Where You Are by Christina Forrest. I really enjoyed this. I was just looking for a happy, fluffy read, and this book was definitely that. I will say it read more like a middle grade book than a like YA book, but again, I was literally just looking for happy fluffy vibes, and this is a book I would definitely recommend if you want that. I think this was also one of her first books, and I've read The Neighbor Favor by her, and I also purchased another book recently by her because I love her writing so much. Like she's just such a good author. This is about a girl who wants to be like a dancer, and she pretty much just like thinks that if she goes to this audition that she is potentially gonna like get the ability to follow her dreams, but her mom doesn't want her to go. So she like sneaks off and goes to this like audition, but she like needs someone to go with because she like doesn't want to drive out of town by herself. She was gonna do it by herself, but then her annoying neighbor was like, hey, like let me help you. It gave me Better Than the Movies vibes because like her neighbor's annoying and they kind of like have a little thing, and it was just very cute. I enjoyed it a lot. Then I read Heartstopper 4, again, rated this whole series 4 stars. Loved it so much. I'm so sad that it's over. I hate when I read books and then they're over and I'm just like literally sad because I can't like read it anymore, like it's done, but thankfully there is one more still coming out. I feel like that's how I'm gonna feel when the new Magnolia Parks comes out. Like that's literally the last one. Like I don't know what I'm gonna do with myself. So since I loved Heartstopper so much, I ended up reading Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, and I did not realize that this is actually a like traditionally published book along with this graphic novel. This graphic novel was definitely hard to read. Definitely hard to read. It wasn't like a fluffy graphic novel, but I do think that this would be a good book if you're wanting to maybe digest some information that would be a little bit harder to digest, but in an easier way because it is a graphic novel. I don't really want to say what it's about because on the back it literally doesn't say anything. All it says is 60 seconds, 7 floors, 3 rules, 1 gun. So I'm going to leave it at that because I kind of went in blind, and I feel like that adds to the, I don't know, a good element in the book. So really like that. Then I ended up reading Good Grief by Brianna Pastor, and the first half of the book I wasn't really sure like how I feel about it because it was very, very sad. But then the last half of the book, which this is a book of poems, but I've been trying to like add in new types of like literature to read, like graphic novels and now poetry, and you know, you guys have heard me talk many times about how I want to add in not only diverse reads but like different types of reads. So this is me trying to do that. And towards the end, I ended up loving this. And I think that I loved it so much because it really showed the progression of how the author like grew while writing this, or just like in life. And I ended up like marking so many spots in this book. I really need to like annotate it because I just like flipped over the edges of the pages. Like these poems I feel like would be really great things to just like put all over your house just to like have little reminders of. Like this says, I take great comfort in knowing that there are even better versions of myself that I haven't hugged yet. Like I think that is really sweet. And another one, she just has so many good ones. It says, if anyone is magically going to appear and just suddenly make your life better, just know that person is always going to be you. Like, I feel like these are just very uplifting, especially like the last half, but the first half was pretty sad, but I think it just shows how the author, I don't know, maybe had like a sad, I don't know, journey to get to the happy parts of this poetry, which I think is really beautiful. Then I read Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, and I rated this 4.5 stars. I love her writing. I don't know why it took me so long to read a book from her. I ate this up, like absolutely ate it up. If you guys have been putting off a book by Abby Jimenez, please pick this book up. you will love it. Like, her writing reminds me, I don't even know what it reminds me of. It just, like, you speed through it. Like, you don't want to put it down. It feels very, like, I don't know, maybe because there's so much dialogue in it. I really don't know, but it's about Alexis, who she's a city girl, and she ends up going to this small town. I think her car breaks down or something, and she ends up going there and meeting this guy who he's like the opposite of her. Like, you know, he is very humble, small beginnings, that type of thing, but she's like this elite doctor who comes from this like elite family, and they hit it off, but it's literally at the bottom it says, bringing Daniel into her world is impossible, and yet she just can't give up the joy she's found with him either. With so many differences between them, how can Alexis possibly choose between her world or his? And I feel like this is such a great book because it's very rare that you see such realistic, like, romantic storylines where you're like, are they gonna work out? Like, this is just a very realistic thing. I feel like a lot of adults, like, you have parents who are like, you need to be with this type of person, or maybe you have friends or coworkers or whoever, like, who would judge someone coming into your life that's different from you. And I feel like this was such a good representation of how so many people go through that type of like thing, that type of situation. Really loved it, and I finished it so fast. I think I finished it in less than 24 hours. Then I read Red, White, and Royal Blue, which I also really love this book, and I cannot wait to watch the movie that came out. This is by Casey McQuiston. I think I really like this because it gave me so much hope for what like a future could look like. And I always try to remind people that, like, just because you are reading fiction or reading like romances does not mean that you cannot learn or that you cannot like better yourself. And I always try to like see, what am I learning in each book, or like what can I take away from each book? And that's really what I took away from this book. Like, I don't know, the America that we live in now could be so beautiful, and I feel like this was such a good representation of like what that could look like maybe one day. It was very, very sweet. And then I read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. This was a book that I probably never would have picked up unless it was for Kalila D, and I did a video where booktubers choose the books that I read. I think I really like this because it showed such a realistic view of loneliness and how so many people really struggle with loneliness. And I also think that, like, on the outside, it literally says Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine, but like she is not fine, like, at all. But it showed me how, like, so many people, they put on this, like, I don't know, mask, and you feel like they're okay, but then like deep down they have so many things going on that like you know nothing about. And I think that this was a good representation for that. This would have been great for a book club to really dive into and like talk about. And then I read Abby Jimenez, another book by Abby Jimenez, and it's called Yours Truly. And this book is about, I think she writes a lot about doctors, not always, but a lot of the time. But this is about Brianna, who is friends with Alexis from Part of Your World. So it's like the second book, but they could be read as standalones, but I do think you should read them like, read Part of Your World first. But this is about Brianna, and she has a lot going on in her life. She's like taking care of her brother, like she's doing, you know, well at work, but she's like trying to get this like higher promotion. And then comes in Jacob, who pretty much, he like comes in and she thinks he's gonna like take her job. So she's like kind of like, I don't know, grumpy with him. And then he ends up sending her a letter to pretty much like show her or tell her how he's feeling, because he's like, I'm not really good with like words sometimes. So then they start writing letters back and forth at work, and it is so freaking cute. Like, oh my God. I also rated this 4.5 stars. I feel like all of her books to me are just gonna be so highly rated because the feelings that they evoke and the realness that is like you get from these books. And then I feel like the end, like whenever there is either a miscommunication or there's like some kind of like tribulation that the couple goes through, it feels very real. I love her books. So I already picked up the Friend Zone series, so I'm gonna read that next. Then I ended up reading, I literally have read so many books this month, and I'm so proud of myself. But I think that I also want to say, if you're not someone who reads a ton of books, like maybe you read one book a month or half a book a month or a page a month, just know reading is reading. Like, it doesn't matter how much you read. Maybe tomorrow or next month I'll read 2 books, or 2 months from now around Christmas time I'll read 1 book. Like, I literally don't know, but reading is reading is reading. So do not feel any type of way like whether you read a lot or read a little, it doesn't really matter because books will always be there for you. And I always say this to people whenever I'm like buying books and people are like, oh my gosh, you have like so many books like on your TBR. And I love that because when I'm 70 or 80, maybe I will be getting around to The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. You know what I mean? Like books will always be there. You don't have to feel like you need to rush through them. They will be there for you until the end of time. So, or at least until you take your last breath. So, yeah. Anyway, I read One Week in Paradise by Anise Starr. Really loved this. I rated this 4 stars, and I think I love this so much because it was like a very happy, easy book to read. It's about an influencer, and something happens that pretty much like messes up her career, and she doesn't know if she can come back from it, but she ends up getting a free holiday, and whenever she gets this free holiday from this like brand, they're like, you need to bring your boyfriend. So she's like, okay, so what am I gonna do? Because I don't have a boyfriend. So she asks her brother's best friend to go, and he's like, oh, I don't want to spoil it, but man, they fake date and they fake date. It is very cute. And I've already ordered the 2nd book in this series, and I think the 3rd book in this series comes out really soon. So love it, love it, love it. Cannot wait to read it. Then I read White Tears, Brown Scars, How White Feminism Betrays Women of Color by Rumi Hamad. And I've actually been trying to read more books like specifically for learning about like certain things. And so I definitely plan on adding in like at least 1 nonfiction per month, maybe 1 memoir or 1 like just book for like learning about a specific thing, because I feel like now I can take things in like that, but a couple months back I definitely could not. So definitely check where you are like emotionally to see if you're even like emotionally available for like taking on some type of learning, because if you're in a moment where you can only read happy fluffy reads, that's okay. But like I do think it's important for us to like try to take in and digest some information, and even if it's not nonfiction, maybe it is a fiction book that you're taking it from, that's okay too. But that's why I think it's so important to read diverse reads, because I feel like that's like another way to like learn, but in an easy way. Then I read Ruthless by Crystal Zarapia. Really loved this book, and I think I loved it so much because this book tells the story of a girl or a woman who does not want to have children, and then she ends up falling in love with this guy. They get married, and he wants to have children. And they never really had the conversation beforehand, like whether they're gonna have kids or not. He kind of assumed that like she would, and she just like assumed, since he had never said anything, that like maybe they wouldn't. So I feel like this would have been great for a book club, because you do not see this talked about enough, especially like when she's a woman who's like in her mid-30s. It just was a very, very good book to read. Also very sad. The ending wasn't my favorite, but I think overall like the messaging of this was really good. And then I read Accidentally Engaged, and again, I've been trying to tell you guys how much I've been reading diverse reads or trying to read diverse reads, and this is a Muslim romance, and it's by Farah Heron, and I really like this because I don't read romances that are, I don't know, other cultures very often, and I want to try even more to like seek those out, just because they're not front of mind. Like I'm already searching for Black romances enough, because I like want to see myself represented. Then I have to remind myself, in the same way that I want other people, other cultures to pick up Black romances, I also need to dive into other cultures' stories and like read their books and support them as well, in the same way I want them to support my community. So picked this book up, loved it. It was very cute. It was about a couple who they pretty much were arranged to get married, and she tells her parents like pretty much that's not happening. Like I'm going to find my love of my life, and it's not going to be him. But then they actually start to have feelings for each other because they're neighbors. And then she ends up getting in this competition, but she needs a partner. It says like you have to be like dating someone for this competition. So she ends up having him help, and they like fake date, and it was cute. It was cute. And then I read The Love Con, which this kind of had a similar vibe to the Accidentally Engaged book that I was just talking about. I think the biggest difference between this one, it had a lot of familial things in it. Like, I don't know, it talked a lot about family and like following your dreams and following your own passions and following your own heart. The Love Con by Ceresia Glass, also thought this was cute. Again, go look at all my ratings on Goodreads. I give a little bullet point, like 3 paragraphs for every single book, so you guys can kind of get a deep dive into my thoughts. But I thought this was a good book. It's about Kenya, who she is very different, and I think that's what I like most about her. She like does cosplay, and she's just like a quirky character, and I feel like you don't see that enough, and she fake dates with her best friend. The only thing I wasn't obsessed with this book was I felt like just get together already, and they do, I don't want to spoil it, but they do end up giving me what I want mid-book versus like end of the book, but it was still very much like, who are you fooling? Like, you just get together already. But they fake date, and it was another cute book. They're actually on a television show, and they like follow them around. And in this television show, it was interesting because they actually talk about like, I don't know, stereotypes and stuff and the way that they portray Black women in media. And they talk about all of that in this book, but in a very lighthearted way, which was nice to read. And then the last book that I read was In This Moment by Kayla Shawn. Love this book so much. I rated this 4 stars, and this actually took me a full month to read, but I definitely could have finished it faster because I only read like 70 or 60 pages in like the first 3 weeks because I don't know, didn't have time, and I was getting like a little nervous, and it was kind of daunting to like open such a long, like thick book. But then when I got to page like 150, I was in it, fell in love with this whole story, and I already ordered the second book, so I cannot wait to read that one. Rated this 4 stars, and I think there's only like 400 reviews on Goodreads, so pick this up. Like, I love sharing books that like a lot of people don't know about yet. And that is all 19 books that I read during the month of September. I'm hoping that I can read 20 books this month. Like, I was so close. I ended up having like only a few pages left of the book that I was reading at the end of September, but I just didn't end up having time to finish it. But I was so close to finishing it, and I would have had 20 books read, which I like never really do that. I usually read 17, so it was just kind of cool. But one of the biggest tips I can give if you're wanting to read more books, people ask me all the time, like, how do you read so many books? I wake up at 5 a.m. every day. Every single day, even on the weekends. I wake up at 5 a.m. Sometimes I do snooze my alarm and I go back to sleep, and then I get up at 5:30 or I get up at 6. But I get up and read before work, and that, I swear, I get the most reading in. Now, you can read after work. There's nothing wrong with reading out after work or like before bed, but I find that if I've had a busy day, a lot of the time I will literally fall asleep. Whereas in the morning, when you get in the habit of waking up, your body just like automatically wakes you up, and I feel like when you're reading something that you enjoy, you stay awake. Now, don't start books in the morning, like then you'll literally want to go back to sleep. But if you're already in a book and you have like, I don't know, a few hours before work starts to read something that you're like super engrossed in, I feel like it's super fun, and it's a great way to start your day. And I actually have videos on like reading at 5 a.m. every day for a week. I think I have 2 or 3 maybe, so I will link those below. But I swear that is literally what has given me the most reading. And there were actually a couple days where I didn't wake up at 5 a.m. Like last month or maybe the month before, and I just was reading so much slower because that's where I get in most of my reading. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys tomorrow in the next one. Bye, guys.